And now let's get to the zones, the 4 resort zones in Oahu. So currently we have Turtle Bay, which has 2 buildings. We've got Ko'olina, which has 2 buildings. Makaha, which technically has 1 building, although we all know there's a million short-term rentals in Makaha. And there is Waikiki, of course. So Tuan, take it away. Tell us a little bit about these zones and what the folks in this room need to know.
Well, I am most familiar with Waikiki, but Turtle Bay, they're in the millions, like 1.5 to 2 million for 2-bedroom type of units over there. Makaha, it's supposed to be a growing area for investors, but I've heard that for the last 15 years. I've had investors buy out there, but the return hasn't been that great. Ko'olina, you've got the beach villas. They have just skyrocketed within the last few years. They were $800,000 a few years ago. Now they're above $2 million. And one of the things about beach villas is even though it's short-term rental, there's a minimum of 6 days you have to rent. Other than that, the bulk of your short-term rentals, vacation rentals, will be in Waikiki. And Waikiki, like as Judy mentioned earlier, the biggest thing when you're looking at Waikiki is resort zoning. You look for anything that's resort, then you pretty much know that it qualifies for vacation rentals. But then there are buildings that are grandfathered in, like Island Colony, Hawaiian Monarch, Waikiki Banyan, and Waikiki Sunset. The Sunset and the Banyan were just recently exempted in Bill 41. They, prior to Bill 41, I think it was Bill 91, where they tried to eliminate a lot of the illegal vacation rentals. So anybody who was apartment zone automatically got nixed, and Waikiki Banyan sued the city, and won. I don't know if it has anything to do with the fact that the VP for Aqua Resort at the Banyan was married at the time to the head of the DPP. But they and their sister building Sunset eventually got the exemption. So the prices for those 2 buildings have skyrocketed as well. Just a couple of years ago, they were, with the Diamond Head Ocean View, they were like $650. Now $750 with multiple offers. The minute you have anything with a nice view, it's multiple offers and above asking price. Those buildings are really mirroring the Ilikai apartment building. Same square footage, almost kind of approximate to the ocean, but the Banyan comes with parking, and the maintenance fee comes with electricity. So people are opting there. I see a lot of money moving from the Ilikai to the Banyan, and that's what's driving prices up. But the market for short-term rentals is still very, very aggressive, very hot. If you look at buildings like Pacific Monarch, which is kind of across from the Banyan, you're lucky to find there's nothing on the market. There's absolutely, I look every morning and there's nothing. And the minute something comes on, it goes into escrow. So, in my opinion, the best buy in Waikiki right now, Island Colony and Luana Waikiki. Luana, they completely gutted the building, I think about maybe 17, 18 years ago, and remodeled. Everything is brand new. You can still get a nice unit in the 400,000 range, and the returns is pretty good, and it's a beautiful building, beautiful lobby. Other than that, Island Colony, if you have investors who don't have deep pockets, 300,000 and below, I'm sorry, 400,000 and below, those are going fast as well, especially the higher floor units. Yeah.
Thank you, Tuan.
Sure.
Thank you. Now, let's move around the clock. Now, we'll keep you up with personal questions. So one of the things that always comes up when we talk about short-term rentals is whether or not the building is subjected to a rental pool and how that works. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. There are hotel operations in every short-term rental building, but you don't have to use them, except for a couple of buildings like the, what's that huge one we just built? The Ritz-Carlton service, like cleaning, front desk, so your guests feel like they can be serviced right away. Outside, they vary anywhere from, like 15% to 25%, depending on the quality of the management. But all my investors typically use outside management. They find it more economical. Yeah. Now, one little caveat is the Island Colony. I don't want to get too much into the minutia, but the Island Colony, even if you use the outside management, you have to pay the Island Colony partners a fee, a monthly fee and a yearly fee to use their vacation rental license, because they're zone apartment, and they have, the city gave them an exemption to do vacation rental, so they have a license for it. And in the past, owners would just rent out vacation rentals without any license, so they started saying, look, if you want to do this, you have to pay us a fee, or else we're going to report you. And the way they report you is they just send your unit number to the tax office. Yeah.
There's an online portal for it now, right?
Yeah.
You can report, yeah. They encourage you almost. Yes, they do. Definitely encourage you.
There are a lot of just, I don't know, little things about short-term rentals. Once you get into it, it's like going down a rabbit hole.
What's the fine now per day if you're found violating it?
I think it's like $500 or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
And then how does that work? Do they, once you are reported, and how do they assess the $500 per day?
Well, they'll give you I think they'll give you like a week to remove the listing from Airbnb or vacation rental by owners. And then if they follow up and you're still there, then they start finding you. So they won't just do it right away. They'll give you time to say, hey, stop it. Yeah.
Awesome. And so that $500 a day would then be placed upon the listing and how long it was listed for.
I believe it starts on the day where you don't comply with their request to take it off. So they won't go back in time.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, they won't go back in time.
Okay.
But
So from the time that you got the notification.
Yeah, and they'll say, look, we'll give you a week. Next Monday, if it's not off, we're going to start finding you per day, starting next Monday.
It's $1,000. I just found
Oh,
it's
is it
$1,000 minimum for illegal advertisement, up to a maximum of $10,000.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
So it's significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. What other questions do we have? So we are at our Q&A session. So what other questions do we have surrounding short-term rentals, warrantable versus non-warrantable condos, and any other things that we have not covered in today's class?
Impact of being leasehold on all of this.
Okay, great. So when we have a property, as you guys know, we have either fee simple, meaning that you are the entire owner of the property, or leasehold, meaning that the land underneath the property is something that you do not own. So basically that cuts the property in half, right? One owner here for the dwelling and one owner here for the lease. Just like when you are renting anything, there is a lease rent associated with it, okay? Now, When we are looking at financing a particular short-term rental, or in general, just a building in general, when we are looking at conventional financing, that's going to be the lesser of the overhang period that is required. Meaning that if we are looking for a 30-year loan, that lease needs to be at least, the guideline is a 5-year overhang. But technically it's a 6-year overhang because we never count the year that we're in, right? Because we're not going to get into semantics about whether it's March or April. So it's got to be 6-year overhang in order to get to conventional financing. When we are dealing with leasehold, what we are looking at, everything that we do in lending is based upon boxes that need to be filled, answers that need to be given. So if we have a leasehold and it let's say it meets the 6-year overhang requirement, but there is a renegotiation of what that leasehold rent may be, that could cause a problem as well. And if there is, in the condominium disclosures, if there's information about how that lease rent will increase, then that's okay, because now we've got some information to put into that puka or put into that box. But if the condominium disclosures say something like there is a lease rent renegotiation coming and we have no idea what it's going to be, that could cause a major issue. Why? Just like we saw with One Archer Lane, that increase may not be a couple $100. It may be a few $1,000s, right? So how do we come up with that information? So when we are dealing with conventional financing, you're going to be looking for that 6-year overhang. When we are dealing with, and they will take the lease rent and calculate it into your debt to income ratio or your overall monetary exposure to what that payment would be. If we are going for government financing, because remember, government programs are generally more conservative than what the conventional world is able to digest. When we are going for government financing, the guideline is 10-year overhang. So same thing, 11 years is what we're going to be looking at. Okay, so a lot of times when we are looking at the short-term rentals and you do see that it's on sale for $98,000, okay, and you're wondering why has it been on the market for the last 3 months, how come nobody has just swooped it up? It's most likely leasehold with a short lease. Tuan, what happens to a leasehold unit when the lease is too short and it expires?
Well, then the lessor takes over the physical property, and you are basically out. It happened to a building in Kailua, I think, maybe 15 years ago. Yeah. The one thing I would say about working with investors and leaseholds is it may be down the line, but even if you're buying a long lease, say like Wailana, Waikiki, where they just extended the lease to 2069, I would still inform my investor that if they were going to do at some point later on an exchange, 1031 exchange, that could affect their exchange. And if you are doing an exchange with a leasehold, even if it's long, you got to let the exchange intermediary know right away.
That's a new concept as well. 1031 exchange. Yobi, you want to talk about what a 1031 exchange is?
Typically, when an investor that owns a unit is trying to purchase another one, right? So they're going to do an exchange. So if you have an investment property and you want to buy another investment property, that would be an exchange.
Yes, and 1031 exchanges have rules. One of the rules is that it has to be for like-to-like property. So you cannot exchange a primary residence for an investment property. It's got to be investment to investment. Investment is defined as that you have not lived in it for at least 1 year. Okay? Then it becomes your true investment property. The other rule surrounding 1031 exchanges is that it has to be for the same price or more. So if I sell something for $800,000, I have to buy something in the exchange for $800,000 or more. Otherwise, the deferred portion of the proceeds would then become taxable. The purpose of a 1031 exchange is to detax your capital gain tax obligation, or defer your tax obligation. okay, when it comes to capital gains. That's the purpose of an investment exchange. Now, with that being said, if I sold something for $800,000, I could then either buy one property for $800,000 or more, or I could buy two. Let's say that I sell something for $800,000 and I go and buy two $500,000 condos. That would work, okay? And vice versa. If I sold two $500,000 condos, I could then go buy one unit for $1.2 million or $1 million. That would work as well, okay? Any other questions? All right. Oh, go for it.
Okay, so you mentioned getting into short-term rentals. This is going down a rabbit hole. Would you just enlighten us on some of the issues that you see, or maybe your investors see, with being a short-term in the rental market?
Oh, I think what I meant was that once you start getting into the details, for us as real estate professionals, you learn one thing and then it leads to another, to another, to another. I mean, the perfect example would be the island colony, right? I get so many people call me in my previous company asking me about island colony. Hey, I thought, you could do this and this and this, but then they didn't realize they had to pay a $500 annual fee to the island colony partners. They didn't realize they had to pay a percentage of the monthly income, so those are the things I'm talking about, going down the rabbit hole. And of course with the lending as well, if you're not familiar with short-term rentals, and if you didn't see what Judy had put up, you would think, you would talk to your investor and go, yeah, I've seen people go, yeah, you can put 10% down, and buy an Ilikai, and it's not true. And even when Judy was talking about the difference between a condo-tel and a lodging unit, she will lend on a lodging unit with 30% down, but I've had listings canceled because from other lenders who would not lend on a lodging unit because seriously the microwave was on the counter instead of being on a shelf. I mean, that's what I mean by going down a rabbit hole. It's like, what?
There's so many nuances.
The nuances, yeah. And I do remember one time I had to go buy a fridge, put it in the unit to make her happy.
But we got it done. Yep, thank you,
Sure.
Tuan. And actually, that is how Tuan and I met many, many years ago. He was facing some challenges. He needed a condo-tel specialist. He came to PRMG, and that is how we met, by providing these solutions. And what he mentioned is very, very important, right? The reality of it is that lenders, people, real estate agents, buyers, you don't know what you don't know, right? And if you are in the market for a special type of a property, just as we've been talking about today, and just as we talked about the rabbit hole, there are so many nuances, right? And maybe a lender is familiar with the kitchen concept, but they don't know what makes up the kitchen, right? And they cannot guide you through the process so that it is successful. And that's why when we are dealing with out-of-the-box properties, where we are dealing with STR, short-term rentals, the specific buildings, working with an expert, not just someone that says that they've heard of it or thinks they can do it, but someone that knows the buildings intimately, the way that we do at PRMG, the way that Tuan does, as he stands up here speaking to us about it. That is going to be what brings success to the table, right? As Tuan had mentioned, there are so many, we get calls, probably 10, 15, 20 calls a day to our office, and the demographic is generally the out-of-town investor. And as Tuan had mentioned, they heard about these wonderful short-term rental opportunities in Waikiki. They saw something listed on the internet, and now they want to purchase it. And because they spoke with someone in Indiana about condominiums, they believe that they can come in, do 100% financing, 5% financing, that none of the things that we talked about matter. And then, just as Tuan had mentioned, they go all the way down the transaction, all the way through the transaction. They've spent money on their flights out of here, They've spent money on their deposits. They've spent money on their appraisals. They may be in jeopardy of losing their deposits to the seller because they cannot perform. And at the very last minute, the lender that they're working with, who did not know what was going on, says, "Oh, this is a condo-tel. I wish we would have known this before. We don't do condo-tels." And everything falls apart. Months and months of research, work, hopes go right down the toilet. So working with an expert in these arenas is really what you need to do, both on the lending side and the real estate side, to make sure that your chances of success are as close to 100% as possible, and that at least if there is a project that is not viable, that you're finding out in the very beginning before you flew out here and spent thousands of dollars in those inspection periods, and possibly losing that deposit to the seller because now you're unable to complete the project and complete the sale.
If I can add on to that, it's very true. You'll get a lot of investors from California, wherever. And I just had one a couple of years ago where she just swore up and down that her lender from LA can do this condo-tel with 20% down. And I just said, you don't want to be rude, right? So I just go, you know what? Give me their information. And I just happened to have the R105C for that building, so I sent it to him, and then he came back and said, oh yeah, no, we can't do it. But she was ready with a pre-approval letter, ready to put in an offer, everything. And so I would say my suggestion is, very first thing is to call Judy. I mean, hey, does this qualify for 30% down or 35% down, so that you don't set the expectations that they can do it for whether it's 10, 20%, because it's kind of deflating and kind of ruins the vibes of the sale.
Well said. Let's give Tuan a round of applause, guys.